Hello and welcome back to PFF at Night. I'm Doug, joined by my good friends Brad Spielberger and Ari Meirov. Brad, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Doug.
And Ari, how are you doing?
Doing well. We were talking before we started here about how the NFL never stops, even though we're in mid-June when there should be no news, and yet here we are and there's stuff to talk about. So it's a never-ending cycle around here.
It's definitely true. Big news of the day is that Steelers safety Minkah Fitzpatrick signed a contract extension. I'm just going to throw to you, Brad, right away. Brad, break down the numbers for us. I know that's the highest contract for a safety in NFL history, but what are the numbers that we're looking at for this?
Yeah, so $18.4 million per year is, almost $1 million per year more than Jamal Adams, who reset the market last year at $17.5 million. The $36 million guaranteed at signing is the most ever for a safety as well. This is a big-time contract that has implications across the NFL. In the AFC North, we know Jesse Bates with Cincinnati has a month now until the July 15th deadline for franchise tag players. I would venture to guess this deal did not help those two sides. I don't think there's reason for much optimism there. His tag is unsigned still, and who knows if that changes anytime soon. As for Derwin James with the Los Angeles Chargers, I think this deal maybe helps set a benchmark for him to either come very close to or just narrowly surpass. He was taken 6 picks later in that 2018 draft class. Obviously has had some injury issues, but it probably helps the two sides know exactly what they're targeting.
Yeah, Minkah Fitzpatrick has a 76.3 PFF grade since 2019. Safety grades in general, I think, or at least from my experience on PFF, can be a little bit more volatile than other positions. So he's 23rd in that time span. Derwin James is 9th with an 83.2 PFF grade. Jesse Bates is 16th with a 79.9 PFF grade. So all those guys are right around the same range. But Ari, are you surprised that it was Fitzpatrick who got the deal before Derwin James or before Jesse Bates?
No, I'm not really surprised. I mean, the Jesse Bates thing it's been ongoing now for a while. It dates back to last year when they couldn't get a deal done. And honestly, it's just getting worse and worse as more deals come in there for Cincinnati. As for Derwin James, I'm actually curious to see what happens with him simply because of the injury history that he has. Will they be willing to wait a year to maybe see him play out another full year or not? But yeah, I think Minkah Fitzpatrick, this is a guy, if people recall, Pittsburgh traded a first-round pick to get him. They were 0-2 at the time when they did that deal. Ben Roethlisberger was done for the season. Everyone was confused. Why are they doing this? That pick might be high based off their circumstances. And he just came in right away. I think in his first 7 games, he had 5 interceptions. He had 2 defensive touchdowns. The Steelers, I think, won 5 out of those 7 games with a backup quarterback. Right away made an impact, and he's gone on to have first-team All-Pro teams twice. He's graded decently here at PFF. He's still only 25, and now he's locked in for the next 5 years. As for what's next for Pittsburgh, we should probably add that in as well. Deontay Johnson, the wide receiver, another guy who's eligible for an extension. We should be keeping an eye on him as well. And then let's give some kicker love as well. The kicker, Chris Boswell, is entering the final year of his contract as well. He could be another guy that they should be looking to extend there.
I was covering a Patriots Steelers game once, and it was after the game, and Chris Boswell was like coming down an escalator trying to get into the locker room area, and security was like trying to keep him out. He was like, "Guys, I'm the kicker." It was
Life of a kicker.
Moment life of a kicker right there. But yeah, I would say that Derwin James, I think, will probably break the market a little bit in this one. And I'm just thinking back to when I was talking to his head coach, Brandon Staley, at the owners' meetings, and he was saying that he basically wants to build the defense around Derwin James as if he's a quarterback. So I think that goes to show you how much they do value Derwin James. I know he does have the injury history, but I do probably expect him to become the highest paid safety in the NFL at some point soon. Let's move on to the Browns. Let's talk about Deshaun Watson first. He did address the media for the first time in a long time this week. And I think that really the number one thing on everyone's mind as it relates to Deshaun Watson, is obviously the pending legal cases that he has, and then how that's going to relate to what happens to him this season with the Browns. So Ari, when should we expect some sort of suspension news to come for Deshaun Watson?
I'm so fascinated by what's going on over here because it was about 2 or 3 weeks ago when it was the spring league meetings and Roger Goodell spoke to the media there in Atlanta, and he mentioned that we're wrapping up our investigation. But ever since that happened, so many things have happened. There was the HBO Real Sports feature where two of his accusers speak up. There was the New York Times article from Jenny Vrentas, which went really in depth. The number of lawsuits have gone up from 22 to 24, and soon it'll be 26. And there's potential for more, according to the attorney, Tony Busby. One of those new lawsuits, the Watson team said they're not aware of who this person is, so that could open up a whole other can of worms. And Watson's lawyer also went on Houston radio and kind of said the happy ending line during a massage is not a crime. He mentioned that. So many things have happened since Roger Goodell said we're wrapping this all up. I think the NFL would like to have a decision before training camp. I think that was always the goal. But I'm starting to also wonder if the commissioner's exempt list comes back into play, which is essentially paid leave for people who don't know what that is. Because the one thing the NFL won't do is under-suspend the player. If anything, they'll over-suspend the player, especially when it's a serious situation. And the reality here, for people who understand the NFL and the league office, when it comes to these stuff, they really care about their image, and they don't want it to look like a quote-unquote too lenient of a suspension. So regardless how the trial is going, all that, innocent or guilty, they've always been, we got to be over the whole thing because of what happened with Ray Rice back in, I believe it was 2014. So I think commission exempt list could be back in play. If not, I would assume a suspension comes in at some point before training camp. That's what the NFL always had to go for. I will just add one more thing. Under this new CBA, it's not just Roger Goodell making the decision. There's an arbitrator involved who informed Roger Goodell what he thinks the suspension should be. And then based off that, Goodell makes his final decision. So people should keep that in mind as well. It's not only Goodell making this thing. Goodell will make the final call, but there is some help coming in as well.
I think that the NFL, like you said, I think that they're very publicly conscious about this. And I have a feeling that regardless, they're probably going to be viewed as too lenient on Deshaun Watson unless they really give him a 1 or 2 year suspension, just because people are going to compare this to the MLB suspension for Trevor Bauer. So it will be interesting to see what happens with Deshaun Watson and if more information comes out. But I definitely do recommend people read that New York Times article by Jenny Vrentas. Let's move on with the Browns. Talk about Baker Mayfield as well. He is still on the Browns. They've excused him from minicamp. It is obviously a pretty awkward situation there where I'm not sure exactly how he moves forward with the Browns, how the Browns move forward with him. And obviously the Deshaun Watson situation is heavily involved in this too, that you can't talk about one without the other. But Brad, do you expect any sort of movement with Baker Mayfield? I think it's a little bit too late to be talking about before minicamp because we're in the midst of minicamp, but is something going to get done with Baker Mayfield before training camp?
You'd think that teams that are interested would want to get their quarterback, potentially their starter, in place before training camp begins to work on his chemistry with other players and just get the offense, under his belt. The last thing Carolina wants is to scramble and have a new quarterback that needs to learn the entire new system in a year where it's, frankly, a do or die year for the entire franchise. I think what's interesting here is as Carolina progresses through talks with Cleveland and hypothetically gets Cleveland to agree to take on more and more of the Baker Mayfield contract, I think other teams, if they catch wind of, let's say hypothetically, of the $19 million Mayfield is owed, if Cleveland agrees to take on $13, $14 million, I think even teams that are looking at a potential backup quarterback could say, look, we'll send a fifth-round pick and we'll pay $5-6 million. If you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you have Tom Brady and not much behind him. That could be a short-term and long-term solution. Just one example. They obviously have, to bring back Rob Gronkowski and other priorities. But nevertheless, that I think is where it gets interesting is if Carolina gets close to the finish line, does someone swoop in at the last second and try to top their offer?
I'm a little bit surprised by the lack of a market, personally, for Baker Mayfield. Since 2018, he's got an 84 PFF grade. That's 18th among quarterbacks. 81.5 passing grade. That's 17th among quarterbacks. And I think that you can excuse some of the struggles that he had last year for the litany of injuries that he was going through, the shoulder injuries and everything else that was going on. Before last year, I know that he's a player that's definitely got some limitations, but he was a quality starting quarterback. And if you just purely look at him on the field, I mean, there's a ton of teams out there where you could say, okay, Baker Mayfield versus our projected starter. I'd probably take Baker Mayfield. I mean, I'm looking at the Saints, Baker Mayfield versus Jameis Winston, the Lions, Baker Mayfield versus Jared Goff, Commanders, Giants, Falcons, Panthers, Seahawks, Texans, Steelers, maybe even the Titans.
Already. But he's not doing that. My thing is, the clock is ticking. Brad mentioned that if he's going to get traded, it's a new city, a new coach, a new playbook, new teammates, and it's a pivotal year because he's entering the final year of his contract, and obviously every quarterback looks for that second big contract. I still can't see him playing for the Browns. There's just too many issues, a laundry list of stuff that happened. However, I'm just thinking out loud a little bit. If Deshaun is suspended for a full season, let's say, there's no better place for Baker to return and play and perform than in Cleveland. I mean, with that offensive line, those weapons, that defense, I mean, he doesn't have that in Seattle or Carolina, or definitely not if he's in a backup spot. He knows the offense. He's in the final year of his deal. And let's just say they agree on, you know what, you play for us this year. We guarantee you we're not going to tag and trade you after this season. Play well, become a free agent, say, all these quarterback teams, come get me now. You saw what I could do. I mean, I know Baker is the type of guy who has a bit of an ego, and I don't know if he'll put that to the side of all of this, but considering this roster and considering everything that we saw him in college when he had, when he bet on himself over there and he won the Heisman Trophy, could he do that and just come back to Cleveland, put everything to the side and say, you know what, I'm going to play for this team. It's the best roster around that I could play with this year and try to come back. I don't see it happening, but it is one to ponder at least.
Yeah, you definitely have to put his ego aside a little bit there. And, as far as him not forcing the issue, I don't think he helped himself out that much with the trade request, even before the Browns traded for Deshaun Watson. So maybe he's just kind of trying to keep a low profile right now. But no, you're right. I do think that would be the best situation for him if Deshaun Watson doesn't play this season. There's no team out there that, he knows the system, O-line, weapons, all of that. Other factor in this, just Brad, before we move on from Baker Mayfield, is the comp pick formula as it relates to the Browns, getting something in return for Baker Mayfield. Would it even be worth it for them to eat salary just to get, a fifth or sixth round pick? Or is there some benefit for them to just keep this guy on the roster for the 2022 season and then just get a comp pick for for if he leaves or when he leaves in free agency?
Yeah, and those are the calculations they're going through, right? Because even though, he's obviously not perceived, particularly well across the NFL, he's a quarterback, right? So let's say he hypothetically does play 6 games or 8 games for Cleveland, or even if he plays none, someone could sign him to a 1-year flyer or maybe a 2-year deal that nets them a 4th-round compensatory pick, hypothetically. So yeah, there's no reason to eat a bunch of money just to save a little and to get draft pick compensation that, maybe doesn't really hold par to what they could just get by keeping him around, which I think brings up one final interesting nugget. Shout out Josina Anderson at CBS Sports, who mentioned maybe Robbie Anderson, who threatened retirement, who multiple times posted he did not want Baker Mayfield to be his quarterback in Carolina. Maybe those two teams look into swapping players, or in a general sense, the Browns, instead of looking at draft picks or this, pivot to how can we add to our roster and have a net even trade of players.
Yeah, that would definitely be interesting. The Panthers restructured Robbie Anderson's contract in March, freeing up $8.5 million in cap space. Trading Anderson would free up just $1.235 million. They take on $9.7 million in dead cap, but it all kind of evens out by them freeing up that cap space by restructuring his contract in the first place. So I think that when he restructured that deal, a lot of people thought, okay, maybe he doesn't get traded now. But he also spoke to the media today, said that the only reason they say he didn't want Baker Mayfield was that he was sticking up for Sam Darnold. He threw out the retirement tweet over the weekend, and he said that, he was just kind of thinking out loud about that. People were asking him, all right, well, are you going to play this season? And he was saying, well, I'm here. And that's a telltale sign that he's going to play. People asked him if he wanted to play on the Panthers. He said, I'm here. He wasn't exactly very verbose about all of these issues. But yeah, the retirement tweet, Ari, was definitely interesting for Robbie Anderson over the weekend.
It definitely was. I mean, I'm just going back to last year when, I mean, he came to Carolina. He had that year of Teddy, I believe. Then he reunites with Sam Darnold, who he just left from New York. Didn't really go over well for him. And then Cam Newton came in, and he felt like he was rejuvenated. And then it went back to Sam Darnold and PJ Walker again. He just went back to being a little bit not happy there. And he's kind of back in that position again this year. I don't know what to expect. He's an interesting guy. He's had some interesting moments this offseason. Honestly, just thinking out loud, the Baker for Robbie swap makes some sense. Cleveland does need a number 2 wide receiver. You mentioned Josina said it, so she's pretty reliable. So it's definitely one to at least think about.
Absolutely, and I do think that Baker Mayfield would be an upgrade there in Carolina over their other quarterback options. Let's talk a little bit about the Patriots, because I wrote an article on Tuesday about the Patriots, their offense. Going to look a little bit different this season for a number of different reasons, but I was at minicamp last week. I was at OTAs the week before that, and I would say that, we've talked a little bit about the Patriots offense in the past, but I would say that if any other team was heading into a season with a former special teams coordinator and a former defensive coordinator, 2 former head coaches, leading their offense, I think that people would be wondering what the hell is going on with the head coach. But this is just kind of the way that the Patriots are doing things this year, where Matt Patricia is coaching offensive line despite being a defensive coach. Joe Judge is coaching quarterbacks despite being a former special teams coordinator. And one of those guys, or Bill Belichick, will be calling plays, offensive plays this season. No one knows who that person is going to be, but I also expect the Patriots offense to look a little bit different now that Josh McDaniels is the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. Bill Belichick admitted that they're streamlining things. Looks like they might be going to a little bit more of an outside zone rushing scheme. I think that even, the passing game might be a little bit different. We might see some of the RPOs coming over from Alabama. But Brad, I've covered the Patriots, or I covered the Patriots for 8 or 9 years. From an outside perspective, does this sound insane what the Patriots are doing this year?
I remember, I want to say it was with the Philadelphia Eagles, maybe Kansas City Chiefs, but when Juan Castillo, who's a longtime offensive line coach, served as a defensive coordinator for one season, and to put it succinctly, it did not go particularly well. So, like you said, if any other club was doing this, it'd probably be a headline on ESPN every single day. These guys are, Patricia being a head coach probably had his hands on multiple things. Joe Judge, same thing. But yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes, but I think it's fair to have some questions as of today.
Yeah, Ari, any thoughts on the outlook for the Patriots in 2022? I know that Mac Jones was good last season, best rookie quarterback in the NFL, but if they do streamline this defense, maybe this offense, maybe it helps him, but it does kind of seem like the deck might be a little bit stacked against him coaching-wise.
Yeah, I'm trying to just remember if the Juan Castillo thing happened and if it was Sean McDermott who was the one who was kicked out. I don't know if that's true, but it just feels like that's what happened. It might have been, but it's fun to look back at that now. But yeah, first of all, I thought it was a great piece by you, Doug, at PFF.com. You've been there for it all. You were there at minicamp. I mean, I really don't know what the final solution will be. I've been more on wait and see mode, but I guess I'll toss this back to you because I saw Albert Breer kind of mention this, and we always talk about how Bill is looking for edges and doesn't mind being different. He mentioned that Bill doesn't want to lose his assistants anymore. Losing McDaniels was obviously big. If he hired another offensive mind and they do well, then someone else will snag him as well, and he has to reset all over again. Do you think he's looking at these two former head coaches, Patricia and Judge, and he believes we'll work with these two guys, put them on the offensive side, I'll work with them, and we'll make it work. And when the year is over, my staff will still be intact. Is that a logical thinking of you, or could that be happening here with what Bill is trying to do? Does that make any sense to you?
I think it could have. There could be some elements in play there. Like if they had, say, Nick Caley, who's the tight ends coach right now, if they elevate him to offensive play caller and the Patriots go 10-7, Mac Jones looks great. Yeah, there's a good chance that you're probably going to lose Nick Caley, and there's less of a chance that you're going to lose Matt Patricia and Joe Judge just based on how those guys did as head coaches with the Lions and with the Giants. I think the other element here is that a lot of people expected, myself included, for the Patriots to get Bill O'Brien from Alabama, but when Alabama brought on Bill O'Brien as their offensive coordinator, I think that there was at least a 2-year plan in place there. I think that there's at least enough of an understanding between Bill Belichick and Nick Saban where Bill Belichick wasn't going to snipe Bill O'Brien away from Nick Saban, that he didn't want to, put Alabama at risk and then use him as their offensive coordinator when there's a good chance probably that Bill O'Brien could get a head coaching job himself sometime soon, maybe even after this season with Alabama. So it's all kind of coming together in that Bill O'Brien situation. But I don't know. I'm just fascinated to see how it goes because I thought Mac Jones looked great in minicamp. He was hitting on every deep throw that he was putting out there. I thought the wide receivers looked pretty good too. Devontae Parker made some big catches. Trey Nixon, who was a rookie last year, was making plays all over the place. So, I mean, Mac Jones might be really good this season. And if he is, it's going to make this whole coaching situation look a lot less bizarre than it might on paper. Let's get into some more fun stuff. Richard Sherman, who had a podcast with PFF last season, going to Amazon for Thursday Night Football. I'll ask you this first, Brad. Richard Sherman is going to be great, I think, on Thursday Night Football at Amazon. Great get for Amazon to bring on Richard Sherman. Are there any current or former players that you'd really like to see, get into the broadcasting sphere?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I do think he's going to be great, and I feel like secondary players always seem to do well there. They seem to see the field differently and can kind of keep everything in front of them. You put me on the spot there. I think if we get like a Rob Gronkowski back in the booth, he obviously could be funny. But no, as of right now, I think that like Sherman was probably the answer to that question. I think he's going to do a great job. I think if you listen to those podcasts, he does a good job of talking high-level football, but distilling it down for those of us that don't speak that language fluently. I'm excited for it.
Ari, who would you like to see in the booth, either in the future, retired player, current player? Who would you like to see in the booth?
So I had Andrew Marchand on my show, and he's the media expert of all this stuff. And every year the NFL does this media boot camp in LA at NFL Network, and former players, current players, you all go there to go get their feet wet with the TV world. And he mentioned that Cameron Hayward and Devin McCourty were two players that stuck out there. So we should probably mention them. Sherman has been going for years now, and he was there again this past year. Greg Olsen has gone there, and he's already the number one team there for Fox. And considering where the money is going right now in broadcasting, I could see a lot more players going there in future years to try to get their feet wet in the TV world. If I could just go 1 second to a coach, I still believe Sean McVay at some point will step away to go to TV. I mean, he was talking about it this year. I think it was too complicated after winning a Super Bowl with the roster basically all coming back. He's only 36. He just got married. He's mentioned he wants to have kids. He can make good money at TV. Whenever it happens, I don't believe he's someone who's going to be coaching until he's 50. He could still leave and come back when he's 45, 50 years old. So I would just always keep an eye on him. If one of these TV jobs, the number one teams come open in a few years, I could definitely see Sean leaving and going there for a little bit.
I got to jump back in.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have an answer. I apologize. He already does TV a little bit, but Cam Jordan is going to be exceptional when he finally steps away. The dude is hilarious. I can't wait for it. Sorry to interrupt you, Doug, but that was my answer.
Not a problem. Ari said it's good money on TV. Sean McVay could make more money on TV than he can as a head coach. So I think that's going to be really significant for a lot of these coaches, that if they can step away from coaching and make more money doing broadcasting, it's smart. It's a lot less work. But yeah, Devin McCourty, great answer. His brother Jason McCourty, I think, would be great at it. The two that I had were Jamal Williams, running back for the Lions. He's absolutely hysterical. I'd love to see him in the booth when he retires. And the other one is actually Russell Wilson. I thought that during the Manning cast this year, I thought Russell Wilson was really good. He seemed really into it, seemed to really just show off his love of football. I think that when he finally retires, 10 years down the road, whatever it is, he's going to be that next guy who's making, 30, 40 at that point, $50 million, whatever it is per season, to immediately step into a booth to do some broadcasting. But speaking of players who have stepped away from football and moved on to something else, Golden Tate. He goes to baseball, plays with the Port Angeles Lefties in the West Coast League, apparently, and immediately in his baseball debut, goes 2 for 4 with a double, an RBI, and a stolen base. Absolutely unbelievable. So hopefully I'm not putting you on the spot on this one, Brad. But I want to ask you guys, what player, either current or retired, from another sport, would you like to see play football? And I'll actually throw one out first so that you guys might have to think about it for a little bit. And I always thought when Glenn Big Baby Davis retired from basketball, I thought he would immediately go over to football. He was so good in high school. Nick Saban was trying to recruit him. He was a 5-star recruit in basketball, but people were trying to get him to play football. I would recommend anyone to look up Glenn Davis's YouTube highlights playing football, because he was a fullback, tight end, and defensive end, and he just absolutely wrecked everyone else in the field despite playing in Louisiana. I think that if he had played football, he either could have been that stud left tackle, or he could have been, like Richard Seymour as a defensive end. Unfortunately, it never happened. He's like 36 years old right now, so I don't think the NFL is in his future. But Brad, who would you like to see leave another sport and head over to football?
Yeah, this one I was excited about. Really going off the grid here, outside of American sports, but Zlatan Ibrahimovic, the soccer star from Sweden, who has, if you're not familiar with him, maybe the funniest quote in all of sports. The guy considers himself a god, and I guess has good reason, because he's 40 years old and still playing very well. But I think he would be an exceptional tight end. He's about 6'4", 6'5", very built, but has phenomenal footwork and spatial awareness. I think he could be a Hall of Fame tight end, maybe even after he's done playing soccer.
Wow, I love that one. Ari, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, I think this one has been thrown around in the past, but I think LeBron James in football. I mean, there was once a commercial with him in a Cleveland Browns jersey. I think it was a Nike commercial. I think he even mentioned during the Uninterrupted podcast once that during the NBA lockout in 2011, he started training a little bit for football. Jerry Jones found out and even sent him a contract for training camp. He obviously didn't accept it, but he says he has it in his own office, that contract that Jerry sent him. So it would have been cool if that ever happened. His body's built to be a tight end, but that's always one that's always been in my mind if that could ever happen. But I think he'll be staying at basketball and playing with his son one day.
Absolutely, I agree with that. Yeah, maybe after he plays with his son for 1 year, then maybe goes off to the NFL. You never know.
Never know. All right, so while we're here, we actually had a fun topic here we wanted to bring up as well, since we're in this fun discussion right now. Yesterday we got this email from the NFL communication department. There's a new pizza sponsor for the NFL. Pizza Hut is out, and Little Caesars is now the new pizza sponsor for the NFL. They replaced Pizza Hut. And I just thought, I'll just tweet it out. Good Lord, did that tweet explode. I don't know why, but it went crazy. Everyone started talking about it. Our colleague here, Sam Monson, quoted it that someone just out-pizza'd the Hut, and that one has over 50,000 likes. It went crazy. So we're opening up the debate floor here. Doug, Brad, we were talking about pizza earlier today. We said, why not? Let's just talk about it over here. Pizza opinions, Little Caesars, Pizza Hut. We'll start off with Brad, I guess.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go with the non-incumbent, the group on the way out. But I am a Pizza Hut guy over Little Caesars. I do think old school Pizza Huts used to go in there, used to be a whole vibe in there, was a better experience. But I'm a Pizza Hut guy over the hot and ready Little Caesars 10 times out of 10.
That's a good point. But if the old Pizza Hut still existed, I would go with Pizza Hut. But for me, you really can't go wrong with any type of pizza. So when it comes to these chain pizza places, I like the creativity that they show, the promotion pizzas that they do. And the most memorable one for Pizza Hut was that they put little hot dogs all around as the crust of their pizza. It was like these little crust wrapped hot dogs as the crust. That wasn't that good. Little Caesars, though, had a bacon-wrapped pizza, and that one was exceptional. So, personally, I'm going to go with Little Caesars. Can't really go wrong with any pizza to me, personally. But I do think that the NFL has made the right choice with Little Caesars, as long as they bring back that bacon-wrapped pizza, because that was a very solid addition to their menu. But I think that will do it for today's PFF at Night. You can keep it on pff.com for all of your news and analysis. Follow Brad on Twitter at PFF_Brad. Follow Ari on Twitter at MySportsUpdate. Throw me a follow at Doug Kyed. With some combination of us, we'll be back with you guys again next Monday and Wednesday, and we will be doing this throughout the summer. So keep it on pff.com.